artists use shapes? How do artists use value? How can you effectively use color? How can you effectively use positive and negative shape? How can you effectively engage your audience by creating a dynamic, intelligent, two-dimensional composition like the ones we are looking at right now? Presenting a series of videos on elements of composition and elements of aesthetics. This can be utilized in any kind of 2D media form, whether it's painting or drawing or sketching or illustration, storyboarding, video, photography, right? Because we're all organizing a rectangle. And how does one go about organizing a rectangle? How have artists done it throughout history? Are there certain things that artists pay attention to and do over and over? Are there certain canonized theories of aesthetics that artists have been using for centuries? As a matter of fact, there are. You may be familiar with some of them. I'm going to be presenting a fairly comprehensive group of videos covering most elements of composition and hopefully help you think about how to make your work more dynamic, more intelligent, more engaging to the viewer. How are you going to get those people to look at that and say, wow, that's cool, right? Because that's what the business of art is. I'm making something, hopefully, that somebody thinks, wow, that looks pretty cool, or wow, that looks totally dope, or wow, that is straight fire, or whatever adjective you might want to use. In the first video, we're going to talk about a concept called unity. Unity is how you hold a rectangle together. How does everything inside that rectangle work together to create rhythm and harmony and tension, and how to use all parts of the rectangle, including the corners, so that that entire rectangle is working together to create one cohesive, dynamic, awesome image. So we're going to look at this painting by Sparth. Now, Sparth is a concept artist, game designer, artist, and Sparth makes awesome compositions. So what we're really looking at here to start with is what's called positive and negative shape relationships. So the positive shape is everything that's a thing, and the negative space is what's left over. Now sometimes it can be a little hard to tell what's what, because a positive space can act as negative space at certain times. And in fact, certain times negative space can act as positive space. But for now, we'll say the figures, the building, the land is the positive space, the sky is the negative space. So what you notice here is that he has a kind of balance between the positive space standing out in front of the negative space, but also the negative space having its own place to live. So if we start with the building, we see that triangular shape with no top, and then we see the two shapes on either side that also create a kind of very strong diagonal, right? So there's this kind of connection from the top part of the painting down to the sides of the painting up to the corner, and then the same thing on the other side, on the left side, from the top of the building down to the side of the rectangle and up to the corner, so that that white shape actually engages the whole top part of the rectangle, right? It uses that space very effectively from the center out to the corners and then down to nearly halfway down. Now, the ground is, though it's a positive space, when we look at the dark figures, the ground becomes the negative space. And we can see that he's done two different things with the negative space. In the top one, the negative space is symmetrical, meaning it's similar on both sides. In the middle, around the figures, the negative space, the ground, is asymmetrical. So we see a big shape on the left of ground. We see a medium-sized shape on the right of the big figure and ground, and we see the little tiny shape between the two figures, right? They're very different shapes from each other. If you just look at them as shapes. So that's the negative space. And then the positive space, so we have the dark figures, and you'll notice that the figures really merge right into the ground, the grass. And so those figures actually become a whole big shape all connected in the bottom of the picture plane. So it goes from the left side to the right side, and then up into the big figure and up into the small figure. And then those guns, because the guns are dark too, it all sort of becomes one silhouette shape that's set into the bottom corner of that rectangle, and the guns point to either side of the rectangle. So again, that bottom shape of dark, the figures in the grass, is activating the entire bottom half of the painting into both corners and both left and right side, and the white space on top is engaging the two top corners and then the two sides and the top of the picture plane. So those two shapes, dark, light, are creating that really strong balance that is holding that rectangle together so that the two figures in the building can live inside that rectangle but not be solely focused on the center. So it's really important to pay attention to not only the shapes you make of your positive shapes, but also the shapes you make of your negative shapes. In this next one, it looks kind of like the figures just placed there in the middle, but when we really get into it, realize it's not actually really placed into the middle. And they are also doing a really good job of using positive and negative shapes in relationship to each other. So again, we have this figure that's offset from center. And if you notice, the black part of the figure connects three different things together. It connects the dark space above her shoulder, the dark space of her dress, and the dark space of her hair. All gets connected into one thing that again is activating the middle of the rectangle, the left side of the rectangle, the left bottom corner, the bottom part of the rectangle. All that is engaged by that black shape, and oh, lo and behold, that black shape also, those two lines at the top are connecting to the top of the picture plane, and so they are also engaging the top part of the rectangle. And then vice versa, the white negative shape is also engaging from the middle of the picture plane up to the top left corner, over to the top right corner, and all the way down to the bottom right corner. That white shape is engaging all of that part. And so that is creating it's kind of like a yin and a yang, right? A dark shape against a light shape, working in harmony to activate that entire rectangle. So thinking about all the outside edges and the shape of the positive and the shape of the negative and how they relate to each other. That's a major part of unity. That's a major part of making the rectangle work together. So then we go to an abstract painting, and it's the same thing. Actually, if you notice, this abstract painting's composition is not that dissimilar to Sparth's representational game composition. Only this time we don't have things that we see in the world, we just have paint marks. But they're doing the same thing. And the same thing as the last painting, where we see the dark shape and the white shape, the positive dark, the negative white, activating the entire picture plane. So look at this black shape. It starts at the top in the center and then goes down over to the side and engages the right side of the picture plane, and then down to the bottom. And then we can come back up and follow that diagonal over, and then take this first diagonal back down, which takes us to the corner, which takes us to these two vertical shapes, which also engage the corner and the bottom and the left side, back up to this center left area, which is like kind of the emphasis, the major focal point of the painting, and then back up to the top. That black shape is engaging all four sides of the picture plane. Then we'll look at those negative shapes again. They're all different. the one in the upper left is very dynamic. It's got like things sticking in it, and there's a lot of diagonals, and it's got an irregular shape on the bottom, and it's crooked, versus the right side, upper right corner, where it's a long rectangle that's like, you know, whatever that, I don't know, geometry, whatever that shape is, that's kind of like a rectangle, but not really, an off-axis rectangle that engages the whole upper corner. And then the white shape underneath, which engages the bottom up to the center, right? Again, each of those white shapes is just as dynamic as the black shapes. They are not just leftover blotchy shapes. And again, we see three sizes, a kind of the largest one in the bottom, the second largest one in the upper left, and the smaller one on the upper right. And then of course we have the small triangular ones all throughout the painting. So again, we create different sizes of negative shapes also. So thinking about that interrelationship between positive and negative, and how they are both important. So now we're going to look at a painting that does not have the same sophistication of composition in terms of using positive and negative space. Actually, there's a kind of interesting idea where they're putting the boat down at the bottom, and then they have the space between the boat and the land. The problem is there's no visual way for us to get from the boat to the top of the painting, right? It's cut off. Like the bottom part of the painting is completely cut off from the center, and the center up, you know, that island out there, wherever that is completely cut off from the bottom. So there's no visual way to get back and forth between them. All that would have to happen is some of that grass on the right side just take us right up to that island, right? And in fact, by having some of that grass longer would make that whole bottom part more interesting, because it's not just on the bottom. In fact, goes from the bottom up to the center, like we saw examples of in the other work. Or the island itself could connect to the boat. How could we do that? Well, you could have some bigger trees, and then the reflections of those trees could be emphasized to come down to hit the grass or to hit part of the boat. Or the boat could be turned or tilted in such a way that it sticks up much higher from the grass, so that the boat actually connects visually to that island or the reflection of the trees in the island. And the same thing like getting from the island to the top of the picture plane. All you need is some higher trees to take you up there, or the trees kind of connect to a cloud, a dark part of the cloud, to take you up there. So the thing about art, people, is that you are organizing a rectangle, and you can do anything you want. You can make it what you want. The boat can be in any position you want it to be in. And there's a position it can be in that's really visually powerful, or there's a position that it can be in that's static and stagnant and not creating dynamic compositional relationships. And that's the kind of thing you should start thinking about. How do you organize that rectangle in a powerful way? And start to look at art and see if you notice, are they doing that or not doing that? Now, the next part of our composition with unity, shape relationships. So what we're talking about here, we're talking about shapes that relate to each other visually. Because when you make a composition, a 2D composition, there are no things in that composition. There are only shapes. So as we look at this second image from Sparth, there are no buildings in there. There are no people in there. There's no rocks in there. There's no mountains in there. There are only shapes because it is flat, right? The artist thinks of things as shapes because they are shapes. They may be a shape that looks like a person or looks like a building or looks like a mountain, but they are not a mountain. They are shapes. So how do you make the shapes work together? So what's the common theme here, right? The common theme here is that arch shape. So we start out with the building, and we have a big dome arch shape. And then we have a secondary dome arch shape, which is slightly smaller.
and then a tertiary arch shape over here on the left of the building, which is tiny. So again, we see this large, medium, small idea. People, I can't emphasize that enough. Large, medium, small. Practice it, write it down, make a note, make a post-it note, put it by where you work, think about that. Large, medium, small. So we see those arches. Then we see the arch of this rock in front of the building. And in fact, the road takes us visually right to that arched rock, and then the land, the strip of sand or land or whatever it is, takes from that arch right back to the land. So he's connected that right through that water, right? We were just talking about that with the boat. There's no way to get up there. He connects that visually. He didn't have to put that there. He put that there to make it more visually cohesive. And then, of course, we have the arch of the hood of the figure. And so we have these three major arches, one above the other. Boom, boom, boom. Right? And then there's the arch of the mountain above all that. And then you see, oh, there's another arch on the left of the mountain. So that's one shape he's working with, that arch. Some of them are more triangular, some of them are less triangular, but that arch shape, repeated, repeated, repeated. We call that, can call that rhythm, we can call that repetition. And then that arch is opposed with what? It is opposed with a curving horizontal. So not everything is going up and down in an arch. Many things are, but we also have the horizontals, right? The horizontal of the land, and then that diagonal horizontal strip of the road under the building. We have the horizontal of the other land in front of the person, but we see those wavy lines moving through that horizontal. We see the wavy line of the ground in front of as a horizontal. So we really have this tension between the horizontal and the vertical, or between the wavy horizontals and the vertical arches. But basically two kinds of shapes that he's emphasizing over and over and over, right? Not 7 kinds of shapes, not 11 kinds of shapes, not 5 kinds of shapes. Basically 2, 3 if you want to add a triangle, but the triangle's kind of like the arch. But we get to argue that there's 3. So keep your shape relationships minimal, right? You don't need a million kinds of shapes. You need those shapes to work together to create harmony, to create unity within the picture plane. So that's one example. Now we're going to look at the artist Matisse from the 20th century. Hopefully many of you have heard of him. Henri Matisse, contemporary Picasso, among others. And what if you spend spend a little bit of time looking at this and see what is the shape he is repeating over and over again. And again, I'm not a geometrist. Is it a trapezoid? Whatever this shape is, right? So this is a metronome sitting on the piano. This is called the piano lesson. We have the boy practicing the piano, mom watching. So here is this trapezoid, not quite a rectangle, not quite a triangle shape, and lo and behold, they're all over the place. We see this one. We see the one right in his eye shadow, right? The shadow that goes into his eye, and then under his neck. And then the big green one over here on the left. And then there's that sort of triangle shape underneath here. And then there's that sort of orangey one on over here in the left corner. You know, corners can be difficult, but engaging that corner with that triangle shape, trapezoid shape, because it's repeated over and over and over again. And then you find, oh, it's not just the positive shapes like the metronome, it's also this gray-blue big negative shape in the middle, which is turned upside down, right? So we have one shape getting thinner going up and one shape getting thinner coming down. So again, you can see those angles and that shape repeated and repeated and repeated to create unity, and both positive and negative shapes doing the same thing. So now we're going to look at this. This is a storyboard for graphic novel by Mike Mignola. And hopefully you can see the shape relationship here, where we have this sort of triangular diamond-like shape with pointed edges on the bottom. So we're looking at the figure in the front, the Hellboy figure, with the 3 points on the bottom and the point on the right side. And even his head becomes pointed, and then the points of his lapels, and even the points of the shadows in his clothing. There's that diamond triangular shape, repeated, big, medium, small. And then it comes over, and that black shape that connects to his robe or coat connects to the negative space. So here's where the positive turns into negative, right? So the dark on the bottom of the picture plane is dark against light, dark being positive, light being negative, and then that switches where the dark becomes negative and the light becomes positive, right? So here, that sliver of light, triangular diamond light on the right side of Hellboy is negative space for Hellboy, but positive space for the Sphinx. That kind of flipping is really cool, right? When you can flip that negative space like that. But we see the same shapes in the Sphinx, and the Sphinx's eye, and the shadows of the Sphinx. And again, in the negative space around the Sphinx, we see points. We see triangular points over here on the left, into the corner, up on the right of the forehead of the Sphinx, down to the hair underneath in the center there, down to the bottom of the negative, dark negative shape. So again, that idea of I'm just taking that one shape, that triangular, kite-like, diamond shape, and I'm going to play with it and use it over and over and over and change the size. And it just creates so much unity where all those shapes work together. So we don't have rectangles and stars and moons and suns and triangles and trapezoids and quadrupeds and whatever else. We basically have a few shapes that are utilized over and over and over again to create that unity. So now we're going to look at a piece that maybe doesn't do this so well, right? What I'm going to call amateur painting. And by that I mean people are learning. They're not getting paid. Well, they might actually be getting paid, but they're not professional artists working in galleries. They're trying to learn how to paint, right? How to organize. So here we see way too many shapes that don't relate to each other. So we have the oval shapes of the stones to the door. We have the rectangle of the door. We have this odd triangular shape upright, the roof, but then it goes into the corner, so it's not triangular anymore. We have the long skinny shape of the palm tree, and then the different shapes of the palm fronds, and then the two different shapes of the sails, and then the weird bowl shape of the boat, and the gloopy shapes of the clouds. And then you see that the negative space shapes are just left over. They are scattered, and they are very complicated shapes. This blue shape behind the boat and underneath the palm tree and over to the cloud and above these other palm trees is really complicated. Versus over here on the right side of the painting, we have a bunch of stripes. So there's no organic shapes over here, and there's only organic shapes on the left. So hopefully you can see how all these different shapes, the vertical and the horizontal shapes of the siding and the beams coming down on the porch or wherever they are, none of them go together. Hope you can see that. It's very chaotic. It's very complicated. So then you might say, well, but those are the shapes of things in the world. What are you supposed to do? Well, as an artist, you're supposed to find a way to emphasize a certain shape above the others. Now, when you think about that Mike Mignola painting, he didn't have to use that triangular kite shape. He chose to use it over and over. So what could we have done here? Well, we could de-emphasize the horizontal strips, boards of the house. De-emphasize the verticals. Instead, maybe you could see that actually there's some shadows underneath the eaves of the house, and that maybe there's some triangular shadows. What I'd say is, let's try to find a way to use triangles in this painting. So maybe there's some triangular shadows, or you could just invent some triangular shadows underneath that and emphasize those instead of the horizontals and the verticals. The stones, again, could be more triangular, right? Or trapezoidal. So they have points. They don't have to be round stones. It doesn't matter what stones are in front of the house. Like you're making a painting, you're not building a walkway. So make them angular. Emphasize the triangular shapes around the tree, right? The palm fronds can go in any direction you want them to go. They don't have to be a star, right? In fact, palm fronds aren't a star anyway. It's not how they work. You could emphasize triangular shapes there, and instead of having the sails curved, they could be triangles. Instead of having the curved bottom of the boat, you could be in the water and you could make it into triangles. So, right? Does that make sense? That's your job. You find a way to unify those shapes together to make a much more cohesive, unified, less chaotic composition. So if you think you're getting anything out of this video, or you know someone who could use it or maybe would enjoy it, please share. That would be my first ask. My second ask would be to like and subscribe. And then my third ask would be to comment. What do you think about my analysis? How have you used these elements in your own work? Is this new information? Is this helpful information? Whatever you might want to say about it. And hopefully these videos can help you as you develop your artistic journey and increase the intelligence of your work. And by the way, thanks for being here, and thank you for watching to this point. Let's see if we can make it to the end. Our last element of unity is going to be active and resting space and emphasis. So it's kind of like two things, but they're related. So we have active space, which means something is going on in the painting, and resting space, which means something is not going on in the painting, therefore emphasizing the active space. For an analogy, I like to say you cannot be awake all the time. You have to rest. The viewer also can't be looking all the time. The eye needs to rest, right? It's like any oppositional force. It's dark and then it's light. It's cold and then it's warm. So here we're looking at an image by Roger Dean, who is an illustrator and of course is very famous for his Yes album covers and some other band album covers. So this is a great example of active and rest. So of course we have the active trees. The trees, there's a lot going on. There's a lot of shapes. There's a lot of variety of shapes. Some of the trees are straighter. Some of them have more bends and twists. Some of them are light, some of them are dark. Some of the foliage is flat and like a silhouette, and some of the foliage is mottled and has light and dark. Some of the foliage is dark, some of the foliage is light. They have different numbers of branches, different densities of branches, right? So that's the active, all of those trees, and then of course the rocks. So that's the active part. Notice that active part again, going back to positive and negative. Notice how this tree on the right, the main tree of the composition, look what that does to the rectangle. It's engaging all four sides, people. It is touching the middle bottom, the middle left bottom, over to the bottom right corner, again engaging the corner, up, over to the center top, and then all the way over to the top left, engaging that corner, right? That shape, that again is a beautiful, dark, positive shape against that negative space, that yin-yang of, positive and negative, and in this case, active rest. The positive is active, the negative is rest. The positive enhances that restful negative. The restful negative enhances the active positive. So think about that, right? Where is the rest area? Where's the activity? Is there something, is there a part that's different than the other part? Do you have that oppositional visual force of active rest in your composition? Here's another one. Now this again, I believe this is Eva Fialka. I'm not 100% sure. I believe. I'm hoping giving credit to the right person. Now this is a little bit more minimal composition, and we have a lot of open space. But again, it's that idea of active and rest, right? Where the black shape, actually, you know, the hair shape, if you want to see it as hair, is very active. There's a lot going on. It has a lot of texture. It has value difference. It has color difference. It's touching multiple edges. It's the most dynamic shape in the composition, right? Her face is not the most dynamic shape. That hair is the most dynamic shape. That is the active space, which frames her face. Her face is actually much calmer, right? If you look at the top part of her chest, her shoulders, bottom of her throat there, that's all active. And with that little green shape and the yellow shape and the blue shape, that's all active. And then the black is all active. And then the face becomes rest inside of that activity. You know where that's influenced from? That is influenced from an artist named Gustav Klimt, who was a master at that. And then the space, the negative space around there, it's subtle, it's restful, even the dress, but there's subtle little bits in there that keep the viewer interested, but it's not actually active, right? It's just like interesting rest space. And this is one of the things that really can separate really smart art from art that's not quite there yet. The ability to make your negative space, your rest areas, interesting visually through color, texture, surface, and still make them restful. It's almost like an oxymoron. It's restful, but it's interesting. Rest. And then our last one here. So Cy Twombly. So the thing I want to emphasize to people, makes no difference what your subject is. This makes no difference if it's super realism, if it's kind of realistic, if it's totally abstract, if it's quasi-abstract like this painting, if it lives somewhere in the world between abstract and representational, which most art does nowadays. It doesn't make any difference. It's all the same visual language because it's all shapes in a rectangle. So the same thing applies. We have an active area and a rest area. So the active area, of course, is the right side of the picture plane that's engaging all of the right side and the two corners. And there's all the drips and the colors and the layers, and it's very messy and drippy and full, and there's a lot going on. And then we come over here to that white, and it's more restful. And then there's areas of open white space in the upper left corner, and then in sort of a little bit center left, there's just quiet white space to go and rest, and then let your eye come back into the energy and then go and rest. Interestingly, this painting is about a naval battle. So it's that same kind of thing where we have the battle and then we have the aftermath of the battle, or the before the battle, right? Where those ships are basically sunk and they're not there anymore, right? That active rest of the battle, the active rest of the painting. Now this artist, one of the things to notice in terms of unity is how actually is he engaging this corner up here, because I keep talking about that. And he's actually doing that with what's called an implied line. So this is the major shape of the image. This is the focal point, or the major area of emphasis, this boat right here that's being destroyed. Where does it point? Oh, it points right to the corner. Where does this boat point? The red boat up above it that's outlined. Where does it point? Oh, right up to that corner. These scratched out boats down below left, just the gray scratch out lines. Where do those left diagonals take us? Point right to the corner. So he's just engaging our eyes to like, oh yeah, don't forget that corner's there. I know that corner's there. I'm choosing to leave it empty, but I know it's there, and that's how you get there visually. Really cool. So now we'll look at a painting which again is struggling with this idea of active and rest. So here we have a painting where we're trying to get a sense of active and rest. You could say, well, the grass, the wheat, whatever that, the field, whatever that is, might be active a little bit, and the clouds restful, but not really. Because everything is engaged, right? Every part of this painting is engaged with some kind of activity. The clouds have swirls in them. The mountains have streaks in them. The green-yellow field has those lines cutting through in diagonals that make a lot of tension. And then, of course, the bottom part is very active with all those short, streaky diagonals. So the problem is that actually nothing is truly engaged as the active part and nothing is truly engaged as the restful part. They're all kind of engaged, right? And so the eye doesn't know what to look at. What am I supposed to look at? Like it's all saying, look at me, look at me, look at me, look at me. You know, think of it like 5 kids talking at once. What do you say? You say, all right, one at a time. Like, what's the major thing I'm looking at? What's the thing that is the rest behind the thing I'm looking at? And is there some secondary stuff I'm looking at? So again, what can we do about that? Well, you don't really want just the bottom to be active and the top to be quiet, because what are you losing there? You're losing your unity from top to bottom. So you really have to think about, how do I engage some part of the painting that touches more parts of the painting, that becomes the subject. So if this was a different kind of cropped view where we have a lower vision, a lower angle of vision, we're looking sort of sideways at the field rather than down on it, then, and if it's a horizontal composition, you could engage that waving grass in a more interesting way with changes in height, which could touch into the mountains in some parts or not other parts, or the fence could touch up to the mountains or the sky in some parts and not other parts. And so where the field is and the parts of the fence where the field touches the fence and all that becomes the active, and then the field in behind that and the sky behind that becomes the rest. So that is our introduction to Unity. I hope it was helpful. I hope you learned something. In our next video, we are going to look at value. And I believe when I see novice and intermediate art, the least utilized, most powerful thing at your disposal is value. And we will talk about that next time. Thanks for watching. Check out my other art videos on the page, JS Bird at Yellow Deer Studios. Take care.